In the dim glow of crystal chandeliers at Romano's, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, the air was thick with the scent of aged wine and power. It was November 12th, a rainy night that turned the city streets into rivers of reflection. Alexander Harrington, the 52-year-old self-made tech billionaire who built Harrington Dynamics from a garage startup into a $14 billion empire, sat at the center of a private table. He was closing the deal of a lifetime with his inner circle. Victor Langford, his longtime business partner, 2 board members who had ridden the wave with him for 15 years, and a silent investor from overseas. The wine had just been poured. Alexander raised the glass to his lips, one sip away from sealing the merger that would make him untouchable. But in that exact moment, a waitress named Emily Carter, a 28-year-old single mother from Queens who had spent the last 3 years working double shifts just to keep her 6-year-old daughter Lily in a decent school, noticed something no one else in that room saw. A quick, almost invisible flick of Victor Langford's wrist as he passed behind Alexander's chair. A tiny white powder dropped straight into the Cabernet. It dissolved before anyone could blink. Emily had 3 seconds. 3 seconds to decide whether to stay invisible or step into a world where billionaires played by rules that could get ordinary people killed. She wasn't looking for trouble. She wasn't looking to be a hero. She was just a mother trying to survive. But sometimes life doesn't ask what you're looking for. In complete silence, without a word, without even breaking stride, Emily Carter switched the glasses. Her hands moved like they'd been trained for exactly this. One clean pour from her tray replaced the poisoned wine with an untouched glass. The contaminated one disappeared onto her serving tray as if it had never existed. Alexander Harrington took the sip. He smiled. He lived. But what he didn't realize in that moment, what no one in that restaurant realized, was that a simple waitress had just saved the life of one of the most powerful men in America. And in doing so, she had just painted a target on her own back and on the back of her little girl. Wait until you hear who Victor Langford really was. Because the man Alexander trusted most wasn't just trying to kill him, he was trying to steal an empire. And Emily Carter had just become the only witness who could stop it. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, let's go back 48 hours earlier. Because to understand how this night happened, you have to understand the man who almost died and the woman who refused to let him. Alexander Harrington wasn't born rich. Men like us, men who built something from nothing, know exactly what that grind feels like. He grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Chicago, the son of a factory foreman who taught him one lesson above all: trust is earned, never given. By 35, he had patented the first AI-driven logistics software that changed global shipping. By 45, he was on the cover of Forbes. By 52, he was worth $14 billion and still showed up to the office at 6 a.m. every single day. But success like that attracts wolves, and Victor Langford had been circling for years. Victor was the polished face of the company, the guy who shook hands in boardrooms while Alexander built the tech. On paper, they were equals. In reality, Victor had been siphoning funds through shell companies in the Cayman Islands for 18 months. The merger Alexander was about to sign would have exposed every single one of those accounts. So Victor made a decision only a desperate man makes. He would poison the wine, let Alexander die of a heart attack at the table, and step in as the grieving partner who would save the company. He never counted on a waitress who noticed everything. Emily Carter's life was the kind of story most men in their 50s have seen in their own families. She escaped an abusive marriage at 25 after her ex put her in the hospital twice. She took Lily and ran with nothing but the clothes on their backs. 3 jobs, mornings at a coffee shop, afternoons at a daycare, nights at Romano's. Every penny went to rent, groceries, and the little girl who still believed her mother could fix anything. That night at Romano, Emily's feet were killing her after 6 straight hours. Her shift was supposed to end at 10. She just wanted to get home, kiss Lily goodnight, and maybe watch one episode of whatever show was on Netflix before collapsing. But when she saw that powder hit the glass, something inside her shifted. She later told investigators it wasn't courage, it was pure instinct. The same instinct that had gotten her and Lily out of that house 3 years earlier. "I saw a man about to die," she said, "and I had a daughter at home who needed me to be the kind of person who did something." She switched the glasses in under 2 seconds. No one at the table even glanced up. Victor Langford smiled, thinking his plan was perfect. But plans like that never stay perfect. Alexander finished his wine. The conversation moved on. The deal was signed. Victor excused himself to the restroom, probably to check his phone for confirmation that the poison had done its job. When he returned and saw Alexander laughing and ordering another round, the color drained from his face. That was the first crack in the conspiracy. What Victor didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was that Alexander Harrington had a habit most billionaires don't advertise. He never drank the first glass poured for him at any business dinner. He always waited for a second pour. Old paranoia from his early days when competitors tried to drug him at conferences. So when Emily switched the glasses, she had unknowingly handed him the safe one he would have requested anyway. But the switch had been seen, not by Victor, not by the table, by the restaurant's hidden security camera that recorded everything for insurance purposes, and by the one person who should never have been watching, Victor's silent investor, a man with connections that reached far darker places than corporate boardrooms. The next morning, Alexander woke up in his penthouse feeling better than he had in months. The merger was done. His phone was blowing up with congratulations, but something nagged at him. The way Victor had looked when he came back from the restroom. The way the waitress had moved just a little too deliberately when she cleared the table. Men like Alexander didn't get to 14 billion by ignoring their gut. He called his head of security at 7 a.m., pull the footage from Romano's last night, table 7, and find out who that waitress was. What he saw on that footage changed everything. The powder, the switch, the absolute calm on Emily Carter's face as she saved his life without ever saying a word. Alexander Harrington sat in his office that morning and did something he hadn't done in 20 years. He cried, not out of fear, out of pure respect for a woman he had never spoken to, a woman who had risked everything for a stranger. But respect wasn't enough, because by 9 a.m., Victor Langford had already made 2 phone calls. The first was to a private investigator with instructions to find out everything about the waitress who served table 7. The second was to his overseas contact with a single message. "She saw too much. Make it look like an accident. Start with the daughter. Wait until you hear what happened to little Lily Carter 48 hours later." Because that's when this story stopped being about one glass of wine and turned into a war. Emily finished her shift at 11:30 p.m. that night. She took the subway home like always. She kissed Lily's forehead, smelled the strawberry shampoo in her hair, and fell asleep thinking the night had been just another long one. She had no idea that Victor Langford's men were already outside her apartment building. The next day, Emily went to pick Lily up from school at 3 p.m. like she did every afternoon. But when she got there, Lily's teacher pulled her aside. "A man claiming to be Lily's uncle picked her up 20 minutes ago. He said you sent him." Emily's world stopped. She called the police. She called her ex, who swore he had nothing to do with it. She called every friend she had. Nothing. At 4:17 p.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. A calm voice on the other end said, "You switched the wrong glass, Emily. Bring the security footage you copied from the restaurant to the old warehouse on Pier 17 at midnight. Or your daughter dies the same way Alexander Harrington was supposed to." How did they know she had copied the footage? Because Emily wasn't just a waitress. She had a side hustle. She was studying cybersecurity at night school, one class at a time, because she wanted to build a better future for Lily. When she saw the powder, she had instinctively hit record on her phone hidden in her apron pocket. She had the only evidence that could destroy Victor Langford. And now they had her daughter. But here, what Victor Langford never counted on. Alexander Harrington had already started his own investigation. By 5 p.m. that same day, his private security team had traced the license plate of the car that took Lily. They had identified the man who grabbed her, a low-level thug with ties to Victor, overseas investor. Alexander didn't call the police. Not yet. Men like him knew that once the authorities got involved, the story would leak, the stock would tank, and Victor would disappear. He wanted justice his way. So he did the one thing no one expected a billionaire to do. He went to Emily Carter's apartment himself. At 6:30 p.m., there was a knock on her door. Emily opened it with a baseball bat in her hands. Standing there in a black coat, no security detail, was Alexander Harrington. "I know what you did," he said quietly, "and I'm here to get your daughter back." That moment, a billionaire standing in a queen's apartment offering to risk everything for a waitress and her child, is where this story became something bigger than any of us could have imagined. Emily didn't trust him at first. Why would she? Men with that kind of money had never helped her before, but Alexander looked her in the eye and said the words that changed everything. "You saved my life without asking for anything. The least I can do is save yours." They made a plan right there at her kitchen table. Alexander's team had already located the warehouse. They would go in at midnight, but they needed the footage Emily had as leverage. What neither of them knew was that Victor Langford had a second plan. He had wired the warehouse with explosives. If the exchange went wrong, everyone would die: Emily, Lily, and anyone who tried to save them. Midnight approached. Emily and Alexander drove to Pier 17 together. No police, no SWAT, just two people who had nothing in common except one glass of wine and one little girl. As they walked into the warehouse, the lights came on. Victor Langford stood there with 3 armed men. Lily was tied to a chair 20 feet away, terrified but unharmed. "You really came yourself, Alex," Victor sneered. The great Alexander Harrington risking everything for a waitress, pathetic. Alexander stepped forward. "Let the girl go. You can have the company, just let them walk." Victor laughed. "Too late, the investor wants blood now." But here's the twist no one saw coming. The one that still gives me chills every time I tell this story. One of Victor's own men, the biggest guy in the room, suddenly turned his gun on Victor. "Sorry, boss, but Mr. Harrington paid me double last week." It was a setup. Alexander had turned Victor's own security against him days earlier when he first saw the footage. Chaos erupted. Gunshots. Emily grabbed Lily and ran. Alexander fought hand-to-hand with the last remaining thug. In the middle of the fight, Victor reached for the detonator wired to the explosives. Emily saw it first. She did the only thing she could think of. She threw the only weapon she had, the baseball bat she had brought from her apartment. It cracked across Victor's wrist. The detonator flew into the water below the pier. The police sirens finally arrived. Alexander had called them the moment they entered the warehouse, just in case. Victor Langford was arrested on the spot. The overseas investor was identified within hours, a man wanted in 3 countries for corporate assassinations. The board members who had known about the plot were rounded up the next morning. By sunrise, Alexander Harrington's company was safe. But more importantly, a 6-year-old girl was back in her mother's arms. The next day, the story broke. Not the full story. Alexander made sure the media focused on the corporate espionage angle and kept Emily's name out of it. But he did one thing that men in his position rarely do. He showed up at Emily's apartment again, this time with papers. "Tuition for any school you want," he said. "A new apartment in a safe building, and a trust fund for Lily that will make sure she never has to worry about anything." Emily looked at him for a long time. Then she did something that surprised even Alexander. "I don't want charity," she said. "I want a job, your cybersecurity team. I'm almost finished with my degree. Let me earn it." Alexander smiled, the first real smile anyone had seen from him in years. "You already earned it the night you switched that glass." 6 months later, Emily Carter walked across the stage to receive her degree, with Alexander Harrington and little Lily in the front row. Victor Langford was sentenced to 25 years. The company's stock hit an all-time high. But the real ending isn't the money or the degree. It's the quiet moment 6 months after that, when Alexander took Emily and Lily to the same restaurant, Romano's, and sat at the same table. He raised a glass of wine and said, "To the woman who taught me that the most powerful move in any boardroom is the one no one sees coming." Emily smiled and switched their glasses anyway, just for old times' sake. And that, gentlemen, is how a waitress from Queens saved a billionaire's life, and in the process, reminded all of us what real power actually looks like. What would you have done if you had been sitting at that table? Would you have noticed the powder? Would you have risked everything for a stranger? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this story hit you the way it hit me, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because next week we're bringing you the story of the truck driver who stopped a presidential assassination and the twist no one saw coming. Until then, stay sharp out there. The glass you're about to drink might not be what you think.